of, the business of, and the process of. Sometimes people joke around, and I remember at one point being in Pompeii, and I found it very much a cringe-worthy experience when we were going through the ruins of Pompeii, and an individual who was pointing out the historical artifacts, etc., that said that the oldest profession in the world, and you can see here with the reminders of slavery, would have had to have been, as things were excavated, etc., looking at forms of prostitution. And I thought to myself, well, it's not. The oldest form and the oldest profession in the world is farming. I think we all know that. Isn't that right? There would be no survival without it. The 5 inhabited continents depend upon it. And it's not just because of going through lockdowns, etc. But this has much to do with world economies. Yes, farming Bermuda is specifically about Bermuda, but we are not alone in this world. We're all connected to and based upon what each other does. That's correct, isn't it? So tonight, we have this topic, and we are here, and we are hosted by Focal Friends of the College Library. We are a body that supports various elements that Bermuda College's library does. I'm a member of that board, and you will hear later on a message from the chair of our board. I'm also faculty here at Bermuda College in English and film studies, which, you know, that's why I brought up that little preposition bit, because farming Bermuda does sound maybe odd, but this is about farming Bermuda. This is about farming anywhere ultimately, but we do have unique elements based here where we are in the Atlantic. True? Tonight, I'm turning this microphone now over to my esteemed colleague in arts and science, Craig Simmons, economist extraordinaire. He really is. He's quite an exceptional individual. And you will see by his moderation this evening, and as he introduces the exceptional panelists, what we're in for tonight. And hopefully this will be an experience and a journey that doesn't end just with tonight. We can think more about what we are doing Bermuda-wise.
Thank you, Dr. Tolaram. Is this mic? It's live? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Tolaram, for that introduction. And welcome to Bermuda College. I suppose as a part of our mission, it's about educating the public. And there's 2 things I'm hoping to accomplish tonight. One is not so bold, the other is really bold. The first one is to inform you about the state of crop farming in Bermuda. And that's why this panel was chosen. We've got Carlos Amaral, who's representing sort of a commercial agriculture. And I'm going to pigeonhole to my right. I've got Chris Faria as sort of a backyard gardener. But I think he's going to break that definition and speak more in depth about the kind of farming that he's all about. And then I've got my colleague, Joseph Weeks, I've put him into the R&D, the research and development category. And I suppose he's going to break that particular classification as well. The other vision, the other purpose for me is a bit bold. The idea that we could move towards a vision for agriculture, crop agriculture in Bermuda. I don't expect to achieve that, but I'm hoping that with the intellectual power that's sitting at this table, we can maybe get closer toward a vision. There have been a number of documents that have been published this century in Bermuda. The first would have been in 2002 by Spreen, S-P-R-E-E-N. Now, all of these documents are in the public domain. You can Google them. So spring 2002, and I think it's entitled A Review of Agriculture in Bermuda, something along those lines. And then there's Aaron McKittrick's study, seminal piece, which would have been published in, I got it right here, 2011, entitled The Role of Agriculture in Bermuda's Future. And there's an excellent bibliography at the end of it. I would encourage you all to download that off of the web. And then the most recent one was published by the government of Bermuda, swanky looking thing, this particular document, which again is in the public domain, entitled Bermuda Crop Strategy 2016 to 2021. So as you go through this document, you can see whether or not we've achieved the strategic goals that were set in that particular document. So for me, those are the three documents that have informed my thinking on crop agriculture in Bermuda, and I'm sort of restricting myself to crop agriculture. Obviously, there's sort of the beekeeping, the aquaponics. I mean, my colleague Joseph Weeks will speak to that. So when we think about agriculture, it's a pretty broad field. So the intention tonight is for each of the speakers to go for about 15 minutes, and then we'll get into Q&A or discussion, if you will. In order, Carlos Amaral will go first, and then Chris Faria will go second, and my colleague Joseph Weeks will finish things off, and then we'll get into Q&A and discussion. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carlos, and he will do a bit of a bio on himself by way of a day in the life of a commercial farmer.
Good evening, everyone. I'm assuming they picked me to start first, so I don't bore you all before the end of the session. So, as Craig had said, I run a commercial outfit in Bermuda. It's known as Amaral Farms. It's second generation now. It's been in operation for over 60 years. So I grew up with basically farming life around me from a young boy, never really realizing the skill set, what I was learning, just being immersed in it as a kid. I was blessed to have a good mentor in my father, where he would always explain. He was always one quick to explain stuff to me, why certain things are growing, and he also instilled the principle of just paying attention to what's going on around you within agriculture, plants and stuff. Tim, I'm already caused a problem with one young lady. Yeah, so what I want to get you guys to understand too, it's not necessarily just a job that we have or we're tasked with. It's a lifestyle that you're living. And a typical lifestyle, I was joking with Craig about it. I literally started this morning at 6 a.m. I got in the house about quarter to 6 this evening, quick shower, dinner. Luckily, I live in Devonshire and I was able to make it. And I'll be up and at it again tomorrow morning. That's the path that I've chosen. But again, it's not a job for me. It's a lifestyle that I enjoy. It doesn't feel, some days it doesn't feel like a pain in the backside for doing it, but that's what it is. With my early introduction to agriculture, with my family, or with my father, I realized I had a knack for it. Went through school here in Bermuda, attended Bermuda College, where I was blessed to have great teachers back then, and age of myself, we were over at Roberts Avenue back in those days. And it was there that I realized, you know what, I want to study agriculture. So I did my 2 years here at Bermuda College, transferred my credits for my associate's degree, and went right into my third year of my bachelor's degree in plant science. Finished that in 2 years, came back to Bermuda after graduating with honors, and basically had an ultimatum. My dad was getting up there in age, and he didn't want to hold on to the business, the day-to-day side of it anymore. It was just too much logistically for him. So the mantle was basically passed to me to take on that operation. But the caveat I had was I had to implement my style of what I wanted to grow. He came up in an era where when he immigrated from the Azores, it was a subsistence type of agriculture. You produced food to sustain your family. So you grew your different types of beans, you grew your corn, you grew your vegetables, your potatoes, and that's what sustained your family. So from a young boy, he learned that and kind of passed it on to me. But it was physical, a lot of physical manual labor. So with me taking over, it was the implementation of, I wouldn't necessarily say high tech. What I generally say is the low tech of high tech, different methods of production with plastic culture, irrigation. It's stuff that other leaders in the agricultural field here in Bermuda, Tom was one of them, they had already implemented that. And you're basically taking your method of production from strength to strength, trying to be more efficient with the land you have, trying to produce a better quality product with the minimal inputs of water, fertilizer, and labor. From there, my dad was still around where he was giving me the support. We invested in more equipment, different types of precision seeders and stuff. And it allowed us to, despite not necessarily getting bigger, increase production and yields from the acreage we do. Currently, we're at about 25 acres of agricultural land that we farm, and it could be as small as a quarter of an acre up to, I think the biggest field we have is about 1.5 acres. And that's spread mostly in the central parishes. With agricultural production or vegetable production in Bermuda, it's a blessing and a curse because we are able to produce multiple crops a season. We actually have a winter season and a summer season. So in the winter months, you'll see a lot of the cooler weather crops such as lettuce, broccoli, cauliflower, spinach, and those crops. We'll get those crops in generally October, November, the first planting, and we'll go with multiple plantings throughout the season, probably as late as May. And then we'll also start our spring or summer plantings in January. So that acreage that would consist of 25 acres, I can get 2, sometimes 3 crops in those fields. When people hear that, especially when we speak to our American counterparts, when we're at trade shows and stuff, they'll laugh at guys like Tom and myself and say, "Oh, you're just a backyard farmer in Bermuda with what you do." But when we basically specify the varieties of crops that we're growing, the type of seasonal conditions we're dealing with, they look at us and absolutely think we're crazy. The fact that we're dealing with a multitude of different crops. So in the United States, you'd have a potato grower or onion grower or a melon grower, and that's all he's going to do. They'll do it on the acreage. They know that crop like the back of their hand. And what bodes well for those type of individuals, because of the economies of scale, they have a system which is heavily subsidized. So the U.S. grower would then have grants from the government, and also over in Europe and UK, they have grants to produce certain crops. That's already offsetting the cost of production and help lowering the cost of the food that's being produced. But another major point which we struggle with here in Bermuda, if we're all growing crops, we don't have we're not contract growers. So getting back to those US individuals or over in Europe, he may be tasked to grow X amount of bushels of potatoes for the Lay's potato chip company. That farmer has a tangible contract to produce that amount for that season. He could then take that contract, get crop insurance for it. So he's hedging his bets as well as the subsidies he's getting to produce that crop. Here in Bermuda, and the analogy I use all the time, everyone's been up to cup match or a county game. You got that crown and anchor table, you're spreading your bets around that table. And that's what we do every time. And it's not to scare guys away, it's just the reality of what we deal with. You can't just say, I'm going to grow 100 bags of potatoes, get a yield of 10 to 1. That 100 bags is going to be 1,000 bags of potatoes. You could have a winter storm, wipes that right out. You're out of pocket for the rent on the land, fertilizer costs, seed potato costs, and you put all your eggs in one basket. So that's why I say, as you got to be a little bit on the crazy side to get into this field here in Bermuda. You know, obviously it's the love that drives you. You enjoy what you do. You like the end product, but the variables that come into play just make it a, you know, to some people a daunting task. They get frustrated, and unfortunately, it doesn't bode well because of the society we're in now. The younger generation is coming along. I'm raising my own. Hello, Sophia. How are you? You know, it's a generation of instant gratification. What you're posting, who's following you, how many likes you're getting. Agriculture doesn't have that glory. You're putting in that lettuce plant, you're waiting 6 weeks from transplant to potentially harvest. And now people aren't wired that way. They want it now. And that's what we're gonna kind of pull the handbrake a little bit. And it's almost a hard reset for all of us to sometimes just appreciate. You know, we're not asking anyone to pat us on our back and give us the accolades and the like. It's just understand every time that you're eating something, a farmer somewhere, either locally or overseas, has put the sweat equity, time, and effort into producing that. You know, again, it's a daunting task sometimes. It's a labor of love, but that's what drives all of us to do what we do. Can it be improved in Bermuda? Significantly. My number one concern, and it's not just specific for Bermuda, it's a trend worldwide, is how do we get this next generation involved in this industry? You know, I'm going 50 already. So if I got another 15, 20 years, I'll be happy. But what's the succession plan? Not just for myself, but for agriculture in general in Bermuda. You know, it's fine to say we're going to look at vertical farming, we're going to look at this different methods of production. You still need dirt farmers. You still need to be able to grow out in the fields crops like carrots, potatoes, corn, coal crops, because the economics of trying to produce those particular items, which aren't necessarily deemed high end and are staple crops, you cannot justify that production. You know, indoors, it's just a tough one. So where do we go? I mean, can more be done to incentivize farming? Yes, but farmers aren't looking for handouts. We're just looking for a hand up to help us to be able to do what we do more efficiently. It's the add-ons for the industry that we need, the support on the back end of what we do. We could all grow stuff. We could all produce it. But when you can't get seed, or you can't get plant material in, or you don't have a facility for storing the product, then all the effort that you've put in for the last 3-4 months to bring that crop to market could potentially be jeopardized in a few days. So those are the things we got to look at, longevity, and it's definitely got to be more of a synergy between the government departments that oversee what we do to ensure we have individuals that have the understanding of our industry, not just individuals, technical officers that make decisions about what's going on in our industry, but are oblivious about how we grow our crop, what's needed to grow that crop, the availability of seed material, you know, fertilizers, crop protectants. It's easy enough to Google what's going on with a particular product and how it pertains to other jurisdictions, but what you're finding online doesn't necessarily reflect our needs here in Bermuda and what we have to juggle with to get going, to get that material or product into Bermuda. At the end of the day, the consumers are going to come up to Tom or to Manuel da Silva or myself come Good Friday or before Good Friday. Where's my Bermuda potatoes? Where's my Bermuda onions? Where's my thyme? Where's my parsley? They don't want to hear excuses about that, whether it's storm or, you know, availability of seed and stuff. You know, and we pride ourselves in what we do, every single one of us. It's just ensuring that we have a better conduit between the decision makers and us. And a lot of times we're the ones on the bottom of the totem pole. We're the ones that are there grinding, as I mentioned, daily from sun up to sundown, doing what we got to do. Yes, it's a business. We're not in it to turn around and say, you know, I've done it. It's still a business. We're doing it to try and generate revenue. We're trying to produce a crop. And each and every one of us that are producing that crop, and I reiterate this to customers that ask all the time, I eat out of the same field that we grow out of. So it's not like we're getting stuff that's imported from overseas that would have stickers on there clearly saying for export only, and it's in Bermuda for consumption. Why is it for export only? Why isn't it sold in the U.S. market? So, when people see us on our day-to-day side of it, if we're applying our crop protectant on there, we're going to use the safest product first, the organics, the fertilizers as well, and then we'll move on to the conventional if needed. But the understanding has to be hit home that what we're producing, we're cognizant of how it's produced, because when I go home at night or my daughter comes home and picks a tomato up off the counter, I know I have no gripes whatsoever about anyone eating that stuff. And we all pride ourselves in doing it. There's different methods of production for each and every one of us. Those that are in the field, what Chris is doing, what Mr. Weeks is doing with the hydroponics. Sorry, good memory, but short. There's niche markets for all of that. And to turn around and look at agriculture and paint it with one paintbrush saying, all right, he's a dirt farmer, that's all he's worried about. There's many facets to agriculture. You've got fruit production, you've got, small soft fruits, berries, you've got the hydroponics side of it, you got dirt production, dirt farming and stuff. And all of it, when you compile the production from all of those different entities, is food on the table for Bermuda. And a little makes us a little bit more food secure, enables more food security regardless of what we do. Okay. And, I look forward to the questions and answers later, because that's, there's got a good cross section in the audience here, and we could be more specific, and, I could try and dial in the answers that individuals are trying to get more clarity on. And with that, I thank you for your time.
One of the numbers that I came across, and I have to thank Chris Faria for bringing it to me. This is not totally accurate, but 3,000 to 300. The measurement is acres. So in this particular document here that came from Aaron McKittrick, he talks about the number of acres that were farmed back in sort of 1910, 1911, nearly 3,000 acres. And today, well, it's not quite 300, but it's pretty close to it, like 370, 360, or something like that. Yeah, so there's been, I like to dramatize things. So I'm gonna throw the number 3,000 to 300. That's an order of magnitude in the decrease in the amount of acreage that is farmed in Bermuda. That's pretty serious. I mean, there's some reasons for it. I don't play golf, but apparently tourists like to play golf. That's one of the reasons. What was the other thing? Oh, yes. Carlos talked about, the plots. And Aaron McKittrick and Spreen talk about the fact that plots in Bermuda are rather small and they're dispersed. So it's not like you talked about your mates in the US and other places where they could just have a huge plot and just plant that and be fine. This guy's got to jump in his tractor. I mean, you do get angry when you guys are driving down the road in your tractors at sub 20 miles an hour. But that's sort of the reason why, a farmer has got to make a living. And that's one of the things that farmers have to do. Move from plot to plot and drive the cost up. The other thing that I noticed from my reading was that the productivity coming out of commercial farming in Bermuda is comparable to anything you see in the rest of the world. The amount of pesticides that Bermuda farmers are using is comparable, if not lower, than what you see in the rest of the world. And that speaks to what Carlos is saying. So, we are at a global standard, if you will. We're there. As Carlos said again, it's about a hand up. It's not looking for charity. Arguably, that's what's happening in the U.S. I mean, with the farm bill worth, billions of dollars, or the common agricultural policy in Europe, where, farmers are, taken care of, as it were. They can buy crop insurance. In fact, reinsurance in Bermuda makes a lot of money selling crop insurance around the world. But these guys can't buy crop insurance in Bermuda. We export crop insurance, but we can't buy it locally. Anyway, next up, Chris Faria.
Thank you for the introduction, Craig. Thank you for the Bermuda College for putting on this very pertinent discussion. Because all of you are here, we don't need to convince you that talking about food production in Bermuda is paramount to our future here. And if we really want to talk about what it means to be a resilient society, or even if we start to talk about independence, then we definitely need to figure out where the food's going to be coming from. So thank you guys for coming, and thank you for the college for inviting me. My name is Chris Faria, and I'm the founder and managing director of the Agri-Living Institute. We started in the middle of the pandemic in 2020, and we started to provide sustainable farming education experiences, workshops for whoever was willing to come. And yeah, it was really popular when we first started. We were teaching at the Tivoli Garden, which is a National Trust property right next to Warwick Bowling Alley. And yeah, we had really good response then. And we've been growing ever since. What we do has shifted. It's very entrepreneurial, what I'm doing, because we're just starting out. I've worked with Carlos for 2 years in commercial farming, and I learned a lot from him. I do have training in grow biointensive sustainable farming, which sounds like a mouthful, but you hear these words thrown around a lot if you're on social media: sustainable, regenerative, all those things. And unless you are growing plants or you're a farmer or gardener, they're just really empty words. So it's good because I have this training in grow biointensive. It's very specific as to what does it mean. So with grow biointensive, our goal is to grow as much of our own food in the smallest space possible while increasing the soil's fertility. So needed all around the world, and that's really what drove the creation of this method, grow biointensive, was the fact that we have a booming global population. And when we think about farmable soil or farmable land, that's a finite resource, which unfortunately is being depleted and desertified and not great things year after year, more and more. So the amount of land that's becoming available to each person is getting smaller and smaller. So how do we take what we have, which Bermuda has quite a unique case when it comes to arable land, and grow as much as we can on it while increasing the soil's fertility? So going back to agri-living, yes. So I have this training in grow biointensive, and I've worked with Carlos for 2 years, so I have experience in commercial production. Been working in horticulture for many years. I think it's 16 years now. I used to work at Aberfeldy, so I have that experience with greenhouse growing and all sorts of plants. I'm a big native and endemic plant freak as well, if you want to talk about that later. So yeah, when I started this business, I say we because I'm the owner of the business, but we have quite a lot of people that have helped us to build the business and work in the business as well. And our focus has always been on education. And that's because in Bermuda, we have lots and lots of resources for us to grow so much more than we do right now. Just like Carlos spoke about, the definitely support from government and definitely general support from the public as well. So I'm going to throw some statistics there and a question out to the audience. And this is coming from the census in 2021. So this is a census that you can find on the internet. You can Google it right now and find the answers that I'm about to ask you. Is how many persons do you think are officially employed in agriculture in Bermuda? Somebody raise their hand and take a guess. There's no wrong answers. Yes. Right. So yeah, the number that I'm going to say is made up of farmers like Carlos and Tom that are here, and then farm workers. Also, you can become registered as a part-time farmer, which I am. So that all pooled together is anybody else want to take a guess before I say it? Okay, very close, very close. Unfortunately, it's a little bit less. It is weirdly the whole round number of 100 persons that are currently working officially in agriculture in Bermuda. So I did the math. That's 0.2% of our population. I don't need to ask you. You already know that that is not a recipe for, food sovereignty, resilient society, a life of abundance that we all deserve, no matter where you come from and all that. So that's been our focus. We need more people working. We need more people working in agriculture, but with us, with agri-living, I put the word living in the business names for us to think about it, just like Carla said, that farming, gardening, connecting with plants to do something with them it's not just a job or like that. It really does become a lifestyle. And for us to think about agriculture and all those things in that way, many of you, I know people here, I know that you are growers, gardeners already. So we're really blessed in Bermuda. The papers, the statistics that I find on the internet tell us that there's only 100 people working in agriculture, but I know that there's a lot of people engaging with plants. Let's just focus on growing food. The amount of home gardeners in Aaron McKittrick's report, it says 40% of Bermuda's population is involved in home gardening. Yes, and that's before the pandemic. Everybody knows that during the pandemic, there was a big drive. Now we're back to normal, which definitely isn't something to rely on. If we look at the big picture, the food that we're getting imported, because it's had to travel, obviously it has less nutrition. But even if we were to eat the food right where it was picked, the imported food, it has a far less nutrition than it should. The USDA has been tracking the nutritional value of all the food crops that we eat, vegetables and grains and pulses. And with all of the food crops, they found a massive decline in nutrients, in the food. So we are saying this because we need to be producing more locally and also considering the ways that we're growing the food, with Grow Biointensive, which is what I have training in. I'm also studying what's called soil food web right now. So it's really based on soil microbiology and getting to know all these lovely individuals that are working hard in our soils. They're not very far away from us, just on, if we look out there in the garden, there's all sorts. It starts with, plants, they exude exudates into the soil and they promote microbiological life, bacteria and fungi first, and then there's larger organisms that come and eat them, protozoa and nematodes. And then the protozoa and nematodes poo them out, and that poo is actually plant-soluble nutrients. So this is how nature cycles nutrients in nature. So how can we figure out how to do that in our own growing systems is a bigger goal for us to think about. So there's lots of different elements to the methods. So yeah, what we're doing right now, I have training in Grow Biointensive, but I'm also incorporating this stuff about microbiology, which is actually the basis. If anybody looks into regenerative agriculture, there's lots of cool documentaries out right now, like Kiss the Ground is one that comes to mind, which is really good to watch. Who's watched Kiss the Ground here? Okay, good. In there it's really good because they also connect climate crises with agriculture, which most people don't think about. We think the biggest contributors to climate change is the way that we make power or us driving around in our cars, but the biggest contributor to climate change is agriculture, unfortunately. But at the same time, it can be a vehicle to reverse the problems that we've created, or the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide, or carbon, is not a bad thing. It's just it's in the wrong place right now. It should be back in the soil. So, discovering methods that work for us here in Bermuda, because like Carla says, we are very blessed because we can grow cool weather crops in the wintertime and things, we're growing all year round, which is hard for the grower and then also hard for the soil sometimes. So finding ways to bring that back and getting carbon back in the soil. Community-based. There you go. So something, term that I've been using recently is community-based agriculture, what we're doing. So right now, Agri-Living Institute, we don't do any commercial production. Like I say, we're focused on education. So we do adult classes. They're starting in 2 weeks' time, a series in April, and then I'm doing a series in May. And what's really popular right now is our children's education. So adults and parents, they're very keen to send their children to us to get some learning and to connect with nature, because that's a big thing, that we connect those two things together. So we want to provide growing education, farming, garden education, at the same time creating this relationship with nature. So with the children, it's more so creating this positive relationship with nature, having experiences outside, which we know is super, super important, especially to combat what's going on with the screen, children being really connected with the screen and all the psychological problems that can happen there. The pandemic has also been, making things even worse. So providing opportunities for children to be outside, it just seems like a silly thing, at least for my generation. But yeah, definitely, offering opportunities there. So children's education, and then also what we're doing right now to make money is working in other people's gardens, and is a great way to, take that education. Some people don't want to come to our workshops, but they like us to come to their garden, and we do all the methods that we do basically, and take care of their garden. So those are our two main revenue streams at the moment. The adult education, it's actually harder to get people in the workshops now that we've returned to normal. How much time I have left there, Craig? You haven't passed me the 5-minute card yet. Okay, I'm gonna wrap it up because I would definitely want to hear from Mr. Weeks and from you guys. So I'm a big advocate for agriculture, obviously connecting with nature. Carlos calls it dirt farming. We're talking about soil. So amazing things about soil. There's lots of studies that have shown getting soil under our fingernails causes our brain to release antidepressants, serotonin. So that just seems like a really random thing if we weren't meant to be connected to the earth, right? So that should be a sign that Homo sapiens, our specific species, we need to be engaged in something that connects us to the soil. You don't need to be out there growing potatoes, but you can be growing something that you find is calling you or connecting to you. Go out and connect with nature probably is the first thing to do. While I think all of us should be involved in agriculture, and there should be at least 500 people working in agriculture, the reality is that we need to meet halfway. And I think what we're offering, with our methods is you can take these methods and you can start growing food tomorrow, with hand tools in your backyard, wherever. So it's enabling people to move from consumers, which I tend to have a lot in Bermuda, and moving us more towards producers. So it's not about like being a machine in a factory, but, engaging with these natural processes. And yeah, I think it's really a fulfilling experience. And yeah, thank you so much, Greg.
Thank you, Chris. I got a lot of weight on my shoulders because I feel responsible. I teach economics, and all is not well in economics. How we value things, like what determines value. So an actuary in Bermuda is valued highly. They can make $500,000. Farmers, if you look at what is it now? It's a government document that basically describes or states the median income among farmers, among actuaries, and so on. And what caught my eye about this particular document, the actual name of it escapes me right now, but when they look at the median income of farmers, in terms of the ranking from sort of 1 to 20, farmers are at the bottom. They are the least valued occupation in Bermuda. But I don't know how often I use an actuary's services. So I have to confess ignorance there. But I know for a fact how often I use a farmer's services several times a day and into the night. Yeah. Sometimes in the wee hours of the morning when I get the munchies, you know. So value. Economics pretends to have an objective way of determining value. It's not objective. It's not objective. It's you know, Carlos sort of intimated something. We talked about, you know, power and how some people at the so-called top have the power to determine whether his life is easy or made harder. And in many ways, it's power that determines value, not markets of demand and supply, because just let the ships stop coming across from New Jersey or Florida, and the value of food will suddenly go from very low to extremely high. As they say, you never miss the water until the well runs dry. But in the meantime, who really cares about water? You know, doesn't matter. Food security. 20 years ago, if you talked about food security in Bermuda, they would send you down to St. Brendan's. I think they call it today Maui. Yeah. In the aftermath of COVID, suddenly it's become respectable to talk about food security because, you know, we want to shorten supply chains. Globalization, which, you know, if you have an iPhone, that iPhone has to travel around the earth about twice before it reaches your pocket. Think, why is that possible? Why can't you just make it in, say, the US and be done with it? But that's not the way they do it. You think about other products that you buy. The supply chains are extremely long. Oh, I just remembered my underwear. Very long supply chain. The cotton is grown in one country. It's sewn in another country. It's crazy, driven by this thing called globalization. COVID gave us a slap upside the head and says, you know something, maybe we need to think more local. Again, 20 years ago, you know, you would have called the folks from Maui to take me down there and sedate me. But thank goodness in 2023, it's currency. It makes sense. People are catching on that we need to shorten these supply chains. Chris, you used the word independence. Yeah, food independence. We've already got documents to talk about energy independence. It's called the Integrated Resource Plan. Yeah, that's what we're following. We're going to put windmills up in the Great Lagoon. We're going to put solar panels. We're moving along with energy security. It's about time we start giving the same kind of credence to food security. Yeah? All right, next, my colleague, Joseph Weeks. I'm hoping that at some point in time, he will be able to share with you what he's creating on this campus at Technical Hall. You know, it's research and development. Let me not steal his thunder. Joseph Weeks, you have the floor.
Thank you, Craig. First of all, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joseph Weeks. I'm a technical science lecturer here at Bermuda College. Just a little background on myself. I have an electrical engineering degree, MBA, Master's in Business Administration, certifications in aquaponics. Just a little background on how aquaponics was introduced to Bermuda College. Dr. Curtis Tweed, the VP of Academic and Student Affairs, Dr. Tracy Harney, a professor of biology, introduced Roy Dennison. He's an Aquaponics Bermuda, so he's an industry partner, to TechO. So he came to meet Delroy Marson and myself. Delroy was the chairman of TechO at the time, and they wanted to start an aquaponics program. So we looked at the program to see how it fit into our culture. And our culture at TechO is food security, renewable energy, utilizing all these skill sets and the intellectual capacity that Bermuda has to solve our own problems. So we took the aquaponics concept, we built the aquaponics system, utilizing the carpentry students to build the infrastructure, the plumbing students to provide the water flow throughout the system, the electrical and electronic students to provide the electricity. So we put a solar, we provided the electricity via solar. So all of the balance of system components to run the solar. I don't want to get too technical with how the solar works, but the charge controller, the inverter, things of that nature, to show just how you size the system and then you put the energy needs, the solar system accordingly. So the students were very involved and instrumental in the build. We have grown to date such things as cucumbers, strawberries, lettuce, like a lot of leafy vegetables. So our endeavor is not to replace traditional farming, but be a resource for traditional farming. So based on the crop rotational cycle, when you have your downtimes, we want in our research and development lab for you to have a resource. So that's the point, to work as a team. So having a community garden traditionally had a certain meaning to the baby boomer generation. That's the older generation. That's the more experienced generation. But now with the Z generation, that's born into technology. All they know is technology. Community farming means something completely different. So how can we work with somebody that has a traditional farming concept, producing vegetables, to one now who's thinking hydroponics, aquaponics, aeroponics? So how can everybody contribute to feeding Bermuda ourselves, like this document says? Right? There's a lot of intellectual capacity on the island, and my focus is to exploit that. So I basically involve these students in every aspect. So when it comes to the fish and the health of the fish, I would bring in somebody from the aquarium that's a subject matter expert. So every time we touch a component of the system, we're consulting experts in that particular discipline. So when it comes to horticulture, like the plants, that's when I would bring in a traditional farmer to guide the students on the best care, how to identify the plants, the different parts of the plant. So every aspect of it, we have consulted traditional subject matter experts in that field. So what our aim is to provide food security, renewable energy for Bermuda. So one thing that was very interesting that evolved was the generations. Like I said, the baby boomers, then you go to Generation X, Generation Y, Generation Z, and this new generation that was born during COVID is the Alpha generation. So they're going to have a different viewpoint on some of the things we're speaking about. Like I've heard the terms of backyard gardens. You can have a traditional farm, but you can also have an aquaponics farm on your porch, in your basement. So you're still backyard farming, but you're looking at it from a technological perspective, not replacing the traditional farm. You can have a traditional farm outside, but you can also have a technological research and development system in your hard structure. So there are a lot of things that people traditionally speak about, but I think that we can look at it through that lens, but we also have to think Bermuda's a small island. How can we put our heads together to bring up solutions, so we don't have to raise the tariffs to protect the Bermudian product? We can protect ourselves by allowing the different, we can have contests, like who can grow an exotic fruit tree of your liking. There's a lot of cultures in Bermuda, different cultures now. They have different needs and likes and wants. Why can't we grow plants to service those needs? Within the rules and regulations. We don't want to be reckless with this, but we can explore with tissue culture, plant propagation, start to grow plants take snippets from plants that are growing endemic to Bermuda, and grow more plants in a structured environment. So encourage all the generations to sort of, be cohesive, right? The Z generation, this just before the Alpha, the Z generation, they are supposed to be the most intelligent ones. because they are submerged in technology, right? Just tap into that intellectual capacity and tie it right back to the baby boomer generation who have all the experience in patience, understanding the soil, understanding how plants grow, so that we can work together. So like I said, the aquaponics is not to replace traditional farming. From my perspective, is to support it and try to be a part of the mix, the strategy. Yeah, so I don't want to get too deep, but that's okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. So now comes the fun part, the best part of the evening.
Questions?
A question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Fire away.
You just have to start off. Backyard farming, which backyard farmer, and all of that sounds almost, and I'm not speaking for baby boomers, I am one, but backyard farmers and backyard farming, that is something that is integral to all people, no matter what
Yep.
we are doing. So again, the statistics in Bermuda, and even people that are growing things in their clay pots, et cetera, whatever that might be. There's a term that I have come across recently, not just the term, but I've been reading in it, permaculture. It's an organization group. It's a term coined by Bill Mullins. Are any of you you're familiar with this permaculture? Which, in some ways, I'm thinking, why does this term exist when permanent elements of any culture, all cultures come from agrarian roots? Every culture does. So permaculture itself, why are we coming to some lofty terminology when what we really need is grassroots all the time? That's what we've needed all the time. And we just have to not elevate it. We have to show, in many respects, the ultimate desperation of it for survival. And I'm not here being dramatic, but we did experience some tremendous things during the lockdown, and people have at different points in human history. This is not a new thing, going without, costs rising, bees dying, fruit limited, all these elements. Yes.
Just if I may interject with one thing I've noticed too, also touching on what Craig had mentioned. As Bermuda's become more affluent of a society, the need that the process that we used to see 20 years ago, where everyone had a backyard garden. So if he was growing mustard greens and Mr. Weeks had sweet potato, as insignificant as it seemed, there was still a food source, right? But more importantly, everybody had that fundamental skill set that was passed down from generation to generation. Now, we're the victims of our own success. It's easy enough to say, well, why bother? I'll go down to the grocery store and I'll get it. Or if I want my blueberries from Peru this time of the year, forget about the carbon footprint. That's what I want because I can afford it. Again, that's what pains me, because the simple things, what made us as Bermudians so resilient and survivors, was our ability to do exactly that. And as you said, everything culture-wise ties to agriculture. There's no culture without agriculture.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. You've enlightened us in 3 different groups. It's fun. So a question that I have is that, what are your challenges from 1, 2, 3 with the support of government to help advertise and get the local public involved to support the 3 groups' creative ways of sustaining ourselves?
Can I speak to that?
Yep. You want to go first?
Yeah, one challenge I see is a structured education program. I'm going to speak to education because I'm in an education institution, and that's what I represent. A structured educational program. When I say that, I'm talking through primary schools, middle schools, high schools, right through to college. So a primary school should have a garden in its various forms. whether it's using technology, traditional farming, but you're teaching the children, so it's constantly teaching them throughout their educational journey. So it's the support for an educational program. That's what I see as a challenge.
So the question, how do we get that into the curriculum? In your opinion, how do we get that?
Okay, so it might,
I'm kind of, your age and like,
yeah.
I didn't come up in school thinking about growing food and raising supply.
Okay, so I have been on the side, just going to different schools and inviting them to come to see the aquaponics, right? So once these students come, and we have a traditional farm at the back of the greenhouse. It's not a large farm by any means or any stretch of the imagination. So it's just a strip of land. So we're growing vegetables in the traditional farming in the earth, and the sustainable system that we built to prove the concept, and then this new engineered system that we have from Oakley that's been donated from Oakley Investments. So, yeah.
Okay, so back to the challenges to get more government involved. I think, as a former chair of the Board of Agriculture, there isn't the synergy there that needs to be in place. You had stakeholders that sit around the board. From that, stuff or positions are placed or changes are placed before us that are pretty well rubber stamped without the consultation with the stakeholders. There needs to be more collective discussions amongst us and like the commercial farmers or even the home gardeners to see where we can get this synergy going to ensure that changes that are going to be implemented or things that they're looking at, we basically have a say or have it bounced off of us before they come into fruition. That's the hard part that we struggle with. That was one of the reasons I stepped down, because they were looking at implementing different things. So, well, how's this? You're looking at stuff that's going to affect our livelihoods. How are we going to be able to be efficient in what we do? And it's counterintuitive. You're being told, look, this is how this is going to be done this way. Well, you're oblivious to how Tom grows and how I grow and everyone else grows. You're relying on information that's being sourced, but you haven't actually gone to those guys that are immersed in that 24 hours a day to see what the challenges are before the changes are being made. We've seen it with our particular industry. We've kind of seen it with the fishermen as well. And, again, it goes full circle. It needs to be better communication between those departments and the stakeholders, us, to ensure that there is that smooth transition of what needs to be implemented.
Chris?
Sorry, it's all good. While he's doing that, there's a word that comes to mind. It begins with an R. It's called respect. I see it with reinsurance. Before the government thinks of anything, what does it do? It consults with the reinsurance people. The reinsurance people bring ideas. The government consults before they do anything. Doesn't seem to be happening with you guys.
Thank you for the question, Roger. You're saying challenges from our experience in agriculture. Great. Well, all the time we talk about, not enough support from the government, but in my case, it's a little bit different, or it is different, because I have opportunities where I work with the government, like we're doing classes I do now at Westgate, teaching sustainable farming there. So that's one, they reached out to me, I'm providing it, using my services, and I've been blessed to just do an apprenticeship program in partnership with the Department of Culture. So yeah, there's some support, but definitely more needs to be done to support our farming industry. We already said a little bit of statistics. The other statistic I wanted to say was about the amount of land. So right out of this report from 2016, it's going to tell you that the amount of agricultural reserve in Bermuda, so like Craig was saying, there was 3,000 acres in production during the golden age of agriculture in Bermuda. That was just 100 years ago. And now, over those last 100 years, land has been parceled up majority of it has changed to residential or something other than agricultural. Currently, according to this report, there's 370 acres in production at the moment. So again, there is 738 acres available for farming in Bermuda. Only 350 is being farmed right now. There's more agricultural reserve not in use than is being farmed right now. So whether this has to do with your question or not, there's just one point that I'd like to bring up when we're having this discussion. So help. If you are a landowner of this agricultural reserve, reach out to somebody to get it into production. You know, if it's lawn, then you could immediately put animals on it, or Carlos can bring his tractor, we can start planting in it, or we could put fruit trees on it, or, you know, there's like a big problem there with the amount of land that is being protected for agriculture, and it is severely at risk because every time they do a new Bermuda plan, you know, the last Bermuda plan in 2018, I think they had 200 submissions of persons that wanted to change their agricultural reserve that they've ended up with, and they want to turn it to a residential reserve, residential zoning, so that they can put a house on it and have transgenerational wealth, which is super ironic. Just like Craig was talking about what we put value in, we're putting value in money, then we're going to get money, but you can't eat money, which is often a thing that's said in these type of conversations. So definitely the challenge is connecting with landowners that have land, and the government should be more actively involved in all sorts of aspects in agriculture. I mean, I think that, remind me your name again? Tolerant, like Ms. Tolerant was saying about grassroots. I mean, the government definitely needs to be supporting more, but while that is happening, we definitely need to be building what this resilient society is, you know, us working as individuals within a community, and connecting with the land. So yes, the government should have some type of scheme to encourage these landowners to open up the land, because there are small parcels, but there are very big pieces of agricultural reserve which are also not in production. There's a great map you can check out with the land zoning, and you can check out your neighborhood, and it has the legend. So agricultural reserve is diagonal lines that are brown. So you can have the legend on, and then you can take the legend off, and it's a satellite image of your neighborhood, and you'll see agricultural reserve in your neighborhood that's not being used. So this is a big problem, but it's also a really big resource that we have to grow a lot more food in Bermuda.
Could you quickly explain how we could get to that resource?
The website?
Yeah.
If you just Google Bermuda land zoning map, it will come up. It has it's like the same map that they use for other things as well, the government. But you put Bermuda land zoning map, check it out. It's a great thing to geek out on.
So it sounds like you guys' biggest challenge is how you get the information to those that are making decisions. How do you get that information to those that's making decisions collectively?
Problem.
It's how do you do that?
The problem is a lot of time, and
I know you guys are. I've met you, Mr. Meek, nice to see you. It's like I know you guys are really working towards, you know, a better, sustainable product. So why aren't you being heard?
that's the problem.
Question: why aren't you being heard?
Yeah, again,
You need to be heard.
it's just how the mechanism, the government machine works sometimes, unfortunately, because, and Tom can attest to this, is there's times we've sat there, we've looked at it, and something gets presented, and like we'll look at something and say, how is this getting pushed on us if it hasn't been at least vetted by us? And therein lies the problem. We end up spinning our wheels trying to rectify a situation or enlighten individuals about decisions being made that's ultimately affecting our livelihoods and our ability to produce. And, you know, again, it's individuals or departments that are making these decisions without actually understanding what goes on in our day-to-day operation. Tom, you say it best, you know, when we talk about the department and how they can grow it, you know, between a lot of them, they have how to grow a potato, right? But these are the individuals that make a decision about our livelihoods and couldn't tell you how we do it. That's what pains us. You know, we're not looking for confrontation. We just want people to understand how we do what we do. And before you make these decisions that affect our livelihood and ultimately food security and how we do our job, then it's incumbent on them to reach out to us and not come bring something to the board and say, well, this is getting presented today. How do you guys feel? That's just rubber stamping it. You know, if you get stakeholders sitting at the board and we don't have a say in anything before it gets presented to us, then the system's failing us. Right? So
I've got a question.
What do you think that vegetables and fruit, whatever, is produced by local farmers from Bermuda? I'm gonna three-part question. That also, like I heard you say earlier about the winter crops and all that deal. When it comes down to the times for the winter crops, do you guys, the local farmers, get together and say, well, I'm growing this and growing that, you grow this and grow that, or you guys just make up your mind what you wanna grow? Because I don't know, but you just run the farm. So.
yeah, no problem.
And also, I heard you say like backers or whatever you guys call them, right? You know, like say for instance, food is like the farming industry is like a self-sustainable industry that could actually sustain itself if you run it properly. Like how you say, there's a lot of acreage of land that is used for farmland but isn't being used. So why doesn't our government or somebody like say isn't some sort of program you guys can put forward to get that land in use? Because like I said, once it gets up and running, it would actually start sustaining itself because people eat, like you said. You know what I'm saying? And also, because when you look at it, the prices of vegetables, I've been telling the other day, like you look at a bag of grapes at $25. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? And it's crazy. And I feel that, especially how the economy is going, it's easier to, especially when I go to Canada and all these places and see these people get this for 99 cents because it's really not in country. You know what I'm saying? It's more or less like you need to make the place work with the people because you know we're in a bad economy. A lot of people can't afford to eat what they want to eat anyway. You know what I'm saying? So at least you can make something happen. It's like, say, just like, because you look at a bird, a bottle of water costs more than a bird. You know what I'm saying? There's whole situations all twisted up. You know what I'm saying? So we don't really have, maybe we got to put like something together and go forward to the government and say, well, look, we could take this land and do this. Pay us to start, like, be real. Pay us to start it off, like, be real. Be real. But once it gets up and running, you can actually use that as a program to help sustain the island also, and to help break down a lot of things that are important also to make up for the surplus that you can't make up or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
No problem. Yeah, I'll touch base on. I made a quick couple of notes on the first. Yeah, three main questions. Percentage of crops grown locally. Again, it's seasonal for us. I think at our peak, I would say we probably provide at least 60% of the produce demands on island. That's seasonal. So that would be with lettuce right now that's on embargo, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower. If all bodes well after the rain, those that planted potatoes should hopefully have a decent crop. That's the high end. But I would say if you look at it collectively across the year, at best, I would say 15% is what we produce on island to sustain. So the other 85% of what we're consuming on island comes in from overseas. And, that's where, as growers, we have gripes about policies that get implemented about pesticides, fungicides, and stuff like that, because decision makers revert to the issue of human health concerns about what's going on. Okay, we're not turning a blind eye to that. Human health concerns would be an issue, but when you're looking at 85% of what we're consuming on island is coming in from overseas, I think the local farmers doing what we're doing aren't necessarily a big factor in that. Because like I said earlier, we eat out of the same field. It's expensive for us to address those issues. I know you've been cutting your teeth, growing and stuff like that. So the choice is, all right, I can make do if a worm on this head of cabbage. Don't make sense mixing up spray the whole field if it's only random like that. So it's a tough one. Question number 2, you had mentioned coordination between growers. When it's in season, like now being full swing, we all grow a gamut of different crops. To say the specific coordination amongst the group collectively. There isn't that with food production, with crop production. Most of us generally plant what we know we could sell with existing customer-based loads. For example, iceberg lettuce has been on embargo for 3 weeks. I've held that embargo outfit for the last 3 weeks. Frank Machado is coming online, backing up me now. So as I wind down, he would kick in. In 10 days or so, Roger Pacheco would be kicking in with a big field. I think Tom's picking now. So the market's there where we could sustain the local demand. What people lose sight of, and a lot of times it only comes to the public's attention, is when the overseas prices spike when there isn't an embargo on. We saw that over Thanksgiving, where consumers were complaining about romaine hearts being at $15 a bag in the grocery stores. It wasn't lettuce season then for us. So with the local agriculture scene, it also acts as a buffer. I've been a strong proponent, a strong support of that. Some guys would say, oh, if the imported price is X amount of dollars, they would have paid that come hella high water if they wanted our local price to be like that. No, I've always been of that mindset. We should be producing it less than the high-end price. So like case in point, before the weather that's been going on in California right now, strawberry prices are going to go through the roof, right? All right, the local berries are just coming online. They're late. They should have been in production about a month ago because we couldn't get the plants in time. If we had them in then, what people are seeing in the grocery stores is that shortage and price hikes, because that's economics at best, supply and demand. You're going to see that. As local growers, we're not going to say, oh, well, Linda's or whatever grocery stores got them at $18 a quart. I'm putting mine up to $18 a quart. It doesn't work that way because we know our customer base is here on island. We don't export anything. So we're cognizant of that. But unfortunately, too, which the general public fails to realize, we also face the brunts of increases in prices with different products. I mentioned lettuce. Every box of lettuce that I pack into, that box has to be imported. So when I'm buying them up at the government marketing center, which brings in that product for us to then purchase and package the product in, I think it's upwards of $6 just for the box. That's before I've cut a head of lettuce, put it in there. So that packaging material is going up, it goes up, and unfortunately, the consumer has to feel the brunt of that. But
So you said about that you said whatever 15%. Sometimes.
At best, that's for the year,
So no, what I'm saying is this: if you know that, right, and I'm sure the government should know that too, because they don't know that, or they're playing stupid. But what I'm trying to say is this: is that if you knew that, right? No, it ain't nothing. It ain't this sort of. I want to say, maybe I'm miswording, like a package that you go put out there to maybe find some backers. When you look at it, right, everybody's into making money. There are a lot of people who jump quick to help to make anything do one, they will jump to make money. Whereas they could sort of help the problem. Whereas you could take that 15% off to like 40 at least. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, well, what you also got to remember too, unfortunately,
50 packages.
but
Looking nice for them, they would.
it's one thing to propose a package, but you need the asset to work with. And that land that's in the holdings, there isn't a whole heap of government land that's not necessarily in agricultural production. I mean, yes, you got golf courses and stuff like that, but it's not something that I'd want to be growing a crop on after the amount of herbicides and fungicides that's been pumped on that for grass. There's a lot in private land holdings that people opt to just have grassed out. Yes, they're maintaining it by cutting that grass every week, getting the hedges done. Aesthetically, it looks beautiful, right? Yeah, it's part of, what Bermuda's charm. Agriculture is pretty when the rows are straight and we're harvesting crops or the lilies are in bloom, but then the broccoli's starting to go off and has a little ranky smell. People don't like it. But it's how are you going to get that land reserves that are in the private sector into production? Yeah. But see, even again, all of them fit into that whole agricultural picture. as Mr. Weeks could attest, is limited by what he can grow within that system. So your leafy greens, you could do some cucurbits, like cukes, tomatoes, peppers, that sort of thing. Carrots is not going to be a viable entity to grow a viable product in there. Potatoes, corn, that sort of stuff. For the square footage and the inputs that go into it, you can't justify those inputs for that. But again, it works really well for the leafy greens. And if you have those ethnic markets that, use a lot of that in their diet, I mean, hey, as a farmer, Bermudans use salad, but it's not a big staple item in everybody's pantry or refrigerator. It's
Can I chime in? I think we should move more to like edible landscapes. Most people walk through the tracks, they have a nice walk, but it's nothing to sustain you. Like, why not present like fruit trees and, things that, like, one thing is one of my pet peeves is feeding the homeless at Christmas time and driving across them to next Christmas. Why not help them to eat all year round? So
Mr.
edible,
Ming?
Yeah, I'd just like to congratulate you guys.
It's on.
Congratulate you guys on your efforts. But just like to say that you can't get anything fresher from the garden to the table. And of course, when we import a lot of products, they're already aged. They're up to like 2 or 3 weeks old. And if something comes in by the airplane, then the price is going to goes up to some extent. It's just that we need to sort of look at our infrastructure and try to work together to sort things out to some extent. And then, of course, you guys have adversities. What I mean is that you've spent a lot of money on seed, plants come up, you might get the wind that destroys everything. Then there's no remuneration there at all. Then you get the night farmers, basically, destroy more than what they take. So you have a lot of adversities against you that you try to sort of come back. I have a little garden in the back of my house also. I've been at the garden all the time. And one night I said to my wife, I'm going to pick some corn for our supper. The thing was that when I went down there, I thought it was corn. The rats or the birds had eaten all the kernels. So you have a lot of things that goes against you, although you find that certain fertilizer can cause things to grow. It can destroy also sometimes. Thank you for your efforts for being here tonight, sharing your thoughts amongst us.
I think Dr. Tolerant.
I did. I have a question. Thank you. Is it possible for the professional farmers to co-opt with genuinely concerned amateur farmers to just do this? However, in ways of knowing, okay, what do I plant now, and what should I be doing, and things that I need to learn. In other words, Chris, things that are in step with the seasons. Carlos, aquaponics, as you're saying. It just seems to me, if there's a disconnect between essential persons, farmers and fishermen, fishing Bermuda could come up too at some point. But right now, tonight, this is farming Bermuda, and let's hope this goes somewhere for yourselves collectively and as we do this, yes. But there is a disconnect, obviously, and the politeness is obviously respected in Bermuda. But what about the non-disconnect that exists again between the people who are pulling the food to the table, worm or not, and everyone in Bermuda who also does bits and pieces of farming that can perhaps do it in a more co-opted way, because Bermuda is so small. We all do interact with each other. And generations aside, farming is something that is done that cuts through all generations. It
Ties
is
it
not
together.
particular to any generation. It's called survival.
May I speak to that?
Yes, yes, Joe.
If we would have farms at all of the learning institutions and have a team of experts to go and teach the students at primary school level, middle school level, high school level, so that they can have a healthy lunch, see how it's growing, and be guided in the proper procedures. I think that would sort of tie things together as far as where we should begin. Yeah.
And Chris, did you want to say something? And then I'll go to Tom.
So Ms. Tolaram was speaking about education, farming education.
Oh,
Is that correct?
That's Mr. Weeks. I'm
Yes.
speaking about co-opting, and yes, I reconnected
Okay.
with you as well in terms of how people that are doing regular farming in their gardens, in their pots, in their kitchens, with water. A number of us do some really old-fashioned things, and they really work, and we eat them. But it's about co-opting all of that and bringing it together.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And you're speaking to creating cooperatives to bring produce together and then sell it as a joint venture? Is that what you're talking about?
Whether it is done as a joint venture or whether there are various groups, just so that it doesn't become like one particular board and
Mhm.
another set of rules, laws, and things that become bureaucratic. That is the problem. But there are things and ways that people existed long before the cotton gin. I do teach that a lot, and it's economics in literature, as it were. Things that destroyed, economies in different ways and made great wealth in another. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I will speak a little bit on co-ops through BEDC. I know they've been working on having conversations with farmers on creating more cooperative models. So that can mean all sorts of different things, but definitely working together to address these challenges, which if you are an individual farmer with the challenge, it's going to be a lot harder than if we agree to work together to do that, or sharing resources and things like that. Definitely, like you said about the grassroots, is a good way to create that cooperative in an informal way. And again, we talk about community-based agriculture. So you growing is one thing. If you can find other people to grow with, it'll exponentially increase the amount that you're growing, and also the quality of the experience as well. Cooperation so is very good. Carlos was saying about 15% at the lowest we produce locally in terms of percentage of food that's consumed in Bermuda. And here it's going to tell you 20%. So that means 80% of the food that we eat is imported into Bermuda. If you think about the amount of money that is per year, you were talking about monetary incentive. What's the buy-in? This resource was shared to me years ago. Well, not years ago, right at the beginning of the pandemic, that it was conservatively $85,000 the value of imported food into Bermuda, and that probably, if you put inflation on that, you can tell me the cost of imported food. More than that, right? More than that. More than $85 million. $85 million. More than that. How much do we think it is?
It's in the bazillions.
Bazillions. There you go. So what more incentive do we need? We can be making bazillions of dollars right now. So yeah, it's definitely something to consider. How can we work cooperatively? Because as local growers, if we can work together, then we can compete with imported food, which is the majority of the share. And there's bazillions of dollars to make, according to Tom.
I don't know, can you hear me? I could yell down the jukebox.
It's okay. You got good looks.
So I've been in this business for a little while. I tried to have to punch out my calculator, 47 years. And it's kind of like the luster can go out of it, but there is so much, the potential of this country to produce food is astounding. I've spent a lot of time, probably the last 25 years, doing what they call pasture culture. I don't think if anybody grows an egg as fine as ours because they've got all this grass in their diet. But equally so, meat chickens as well. Now this is great. So we're making chicken and eggs, but the fertility that we get out of this thing, and that's what it comes to. The whole thing is balancing it all out, both economically and fertility. So as Chris says, it's restorative, regenerative agriculture. And that's the way we really need to be leading. We have spent a long time, as Carlos mentioned, just with our ideas completely shot down. And it's it's scary. But then again, it's not all government's fault either. For example, I worked for 25 years to find out where we could get these sweet potatoes stock in that was virus free. And because it was virus free, it would basically give you twice a year. So I embarked on a deal with these guys, the senior plant. Anyway, we did all this stuff research. You know what the stumbling block was? Oh, we're all US, and they call it USDA inspected. If you speak to my dear friend Joe Saltman, he pronounces USDA as the USDA. And they're all inspected and everything once a year. And so the consequences, they remember, Carlos, every time there'd be trash on. And so we have it's like what we got to do is centralize our plant production more. That's the stumbling block for us. Once we've got a source of locally done plants, Carlos,
You still need the synergy to make it happen.
right?
You're gonna have, like I always joke about this whole cannabis thing, it's gotta have a complete solution, right? And I say that because if plant material has to be imported for that aspect of it. Then and only then would the general public understand what we go through to bring in a crop. Yeah, strawberry plant or whatever. When they look at it, and again, we understand the rationale, it's, for protectionism, but production, sorry, where did I make a note of it? Protection takes precedence over production. And somewhere along the line, it has to be that medium struck to allow,
It's way off.
yeah, that's the problem. And, there has to be a balance that we come to for this. Just like you and I would struggle with a home gardener that wants to plant A, B, C, and D. Well, why can't I get it? Or as Mr. Weeks said about fruit production on marginal land on the railway trails. Those are all options. It's not something we're going to take on commercially, but the general public, there's been a huge upswelling and interest in that. And we're stifling that. Especially after COVID, everyone would like to have, a fruit tree in their backyard, a stone fruit or this or that. I'm not going to go and plant out an acre of it, but that all factors into food production. And it has to be a collective effort across the board where if it's plant material for commercial growth farmers, be it, as you mentioned, the potatoes, the strawberry crowns, sweet potato slips, the fruit trees that do well in, the stone fruits or whatever, the effort has to be made. And it's got to be a directive that comes out where this is where we're going to go. We've got marginal lands that we could use to do the fruit trees on or this or that. And that mandate has to come from government. And all the players that fall under that remit have to understand this is where we're going to go with it. It could be a one and done thing. Once the material's here, the genetic material of certain varieties of trees, it's here, then it can be propagated and grafted. But in our case, there's always going to be those variables that we're going to need every year. I shouldn't be wasting my time trying to save strawberry crowns year over year and having disease issues with it potentially to try and get a jump start on it. We know we're going to have the potatoes, tubers that's got to come in every year. The effort that goes into sourcing out a supply that can meet the requirements, it's a tap dance we do every year. And, the difficulty is it doesn't affect me or Tom Watson or whatever. It affects the whole island. Right? Because if something isn't available when we want to plant, yes, and the onus can be put on us that it's incumbent for us to do more due diligence, but there's no one at bat for us when it comes down to it. We come in and say, hey, we need this. Okay, well, you need to apply for it. This is the thing. No, well, we do this every year. There should be protocols in place to alleviate this or liaison with institutions that supply the strawberry plants or this or that to make sure that that whole process is as seamless as possible. So ultimately, we're not suffering. The island isn't suffering. So.
Oh, sorry. I'm asleep at the wheel. Yeah, you were next.
Good evening. I just had a couple of quick comments that pertain to education. I'm actually a middle school teacher, and I'm also the professor here for the horticulture program. I can say that probably 20 years ago, there was a program here called Learning Through Landscape, and it did exactly what you said, Mr. Weeks. They went into the schools, they had little gardens, they used it for math, they used the produce for their home ec classes to create meals. But it became quite cumbersome for teachers because on top of that, we had this extensive curriculum, which of course was huge, that we had to then focus on. The other part of that is the community support. I can tell you as a public education teacher, it is very difficult to get someone from any industry to come in and talk to students, to come in and work with students. So I'm glad that there are 3 gentlemen who I can call upon to help us at my school. But there was a program there, and it was quite successful. But again, government will, changing of initiatives, et cetera, that's why it ended up fizzling in the minutes.
Thank you.
Yeah. I have a few comments and questions. First one, actually, to you. What would you consider a minimum wage in today's economy or farm right?
That I think is a question probably best answered by Mr. Amaral, since he is in the field. Okay. Okay.
To make it alluring,
Yeah.
to make it valuable.
Well, let's
to
just
make it-
go.
To make it a choice for somebody to say, I could make so much money on my salary, just type of buttons.
Yeah.
To getting my hands dirty. What would you say would be a minimum?
Okay.
Or
I would go with the median income
in today's
in today's Bermuda, and that would be $66,000, which I don't think that's not what I think farm people working in the fields are being paid. I think they're close to what we would, or below what we would commonly call the poverty line, which would be like 2/3 of the median. So that would be 44,000.
It's hard to
Attract.
bring, not just attract, but to educate. When I was an individual who actually did that for a long time, graduated from college and realized I didn't know nothing. How to sustain myself, how to protein. So I actually got into it and realized what we all discussed today, work we put into it, energy I was putting it in, and that's what comes back. And put it sustain myself. Realistic. So now I believe in how you adults create, children imitate. We said the report we had over 3,000 acreage of land to now 300. If you do history, we actually was absolute. Then we had that
3,000.
economics and do a different vision. What you see people just coming and saying, hey, let's go for dinner now. It can change itself, but I find that the food with the agriculture is missing like culture itself. So we can't just say, no, we don't know, we lost the culture, let's get back into farming. Let's get back into, because we got scared of that we didn't see folks coming in for COVID and stuff. Where Johnson like yourself with the screen of this security. The security, like you said, you had nothing wrong. You know. So I believe I would say it's a waste to equivocations educate on farming. I believe this app's only fun, like watch kids plant the carrots and stuff on that they know they understand it. But you're not paying me $7 an hour. I can't do it. I can't get belted. I'm helping to sustain you. Help me out. You know, so I think it's a balance between an office and being what another issue that I see. Reason I don't get into it, or no, they all you do, I can't secure. I have no security. I can't bring in certain doors to protect me. Can't have a legal gun. I'm this. So then you're vulnerable and people are hungry. You understand?
I understand.
And that's what we don't want to address. We just like the pieces and the good air story, just for politics. But if we open ourselves, you see how we can create jobs, improve security. So many ways of it. I had a lab last year of local potatoes, how much a big local potatoes was product to me wasn't high quality. I thought more green. Others paying $10. And I understand why. That was probably somebody asked for the increase in the dollar wage. Prices went up. So the price is going up of my quality of goods. So for us to get back into it, we also have to either repent ourselves, try to remember our culture, our traditions. You know, I think the keys are coming up. We used to ask for it.
I'm going to give you the high level before Carlos takes over, and it's sort of one step at a time because we're so far removed. We didn't get to this place where we are right now overnight. You know, it took decades, a century, and so it's going to take us a while to start heading in that right direction. But I think the first part, which was the reason why I think we have this thing, is to put information in the public domain, and your tax dollars paid for this document to be printed. Yeah. And there were goals set out in this document. And we need to hold policymakers accountable. We need to talk to our politicians because for me, this is really about power, less about economics. That's what I hear because I see the way the privileged institutions in Bermuda get treated. International business. Yeah. The average salary in that particular area is over $140,000 a year. The average for agriculture, like $40,000. So it's coming down to power, and it's got a lot to do with politics. And so we need to let our politicians know that this is something that is dear to our heart. And unless you listen to what I'm saying, I'm going to put my tick somewhere else. For me, it's all about power. Carlos?
All right. With regards to your first question about the wages and trying to get individuals interested in the industry, that particular one's it's a tough question to answer in that sense. I mean, my guys, I know aren't getting paid that low. I could vouch for that, and they were here to tell you the same thing. But the trick, what it is a trickle down effect on everything. So if I'm going to retain the guys that can produce this work and understand my operation, they're getting paid a premium price. That's going to also affect my end product. Remember what I started the conversation with. This industry in Bermuda is not subsidized. I mean, not subsidized at all. Not one single thing we put in that grant has any government dollars back in what we guys do. So that analogy about putting the bets around the crown and anchor table, that's literally how it boils down to it. Now, again, I'm not crying about it. That's a chance that the risk that I'm willing to take and the other guys when it comes down to it. Someone such as yourself, you know, anyone that wants to come in, if you're going to come in as a farm laborer and say, all right, I'm going to make a living out of that, it's not going to be a way to make a living. Somebody's going to have that understanding and want to take it beyond that. Right? They said what I lament a lot is the fact that, you know, Tom stands up, 40-some years has been doing it. I've been at it 25 plus full time. And every year we learn something different, every season. And it's that information, we're all willing to disperse it. But once that skill set and that information that you've honed over the years of observing how a crop grows, what the weather's doing, what your disease potential is going to be on stuff, that's something you can't learn in a classroom.
It's learned out there every day by paying attention. How do you put a price on that? You know what I mean? With regards to that, that is the difficulty you're dealing with. And then again, my biggest fear is that loss of that skill set. I'm not, it's any one of these guys. If Tom decides tomorrow I'm retiring and going, ain't anybody that's going to come along and pick up the keys to that operation and do what it's doing. They probably go across town. Tom be doing 100 miles an hour going out the gates and check you later, because it's one of those things, and that's where I struggle, as a relatively young farmer, also a father that's raising kids and stuff, where I'm not looking at forcing this onto them, but think outside the box. How, like the teacher said, Mr. Week says, how do we capture that young individual that's so wired to technology and everything else to say, you know what? Maybe something's going on here that's greater than what's happening on Instagram or Twitter and everything else, where they could, and you're going to find those individuals because they're out there. It's how do we harness that desire, that interest to make it work,
But I actually asked that during our history, we have never had local farms. There was always people brought in to either show how to grow crops, how to maintain crops, what is used. That's why it's not respected or high value, because it was never introduced there.
Well, if you look at it historically.
No, if you read in Bermuda's Richmond papers, one of some earliest writings of them trying to find economics through agriculture, and what they went through. Most of the Cyril Packwood's book touched on somebody farming there and who they brought in to do the farming. They even had the edges they were being paid. I'm not saying they were underpaid or whatnot, but it's always been an industry. The birth of capitalism, in a sense, to I'm doing it to make a profit or to get some profit. We are color. Somebody sold this piece of land to try to get economics, not build this place up to be, out wild or something like that. It was cool to bring stuff up, keep fair, just food, and that's why we can't go back and say, well, we got people get paid this in the industry, or this industry gave this much of money in this year frame or this census. I was just sort of being facetious on why we don't see locals saying, hey, I want to sign up to college, learn how to grow some groceries from, or sustain myself. I find people go that direction and their placement there when they see that a hurricane comes and the boat can't come in. No, they become.
Well, that's it.
I become a person's best friend. Like, okay, so let's move forward. I think we're gonna have to. Let's guarantee if you said, "Oh, we're gonna grow marijuana this hill island,"
Everybody's a farmer.
People sign up to
Yeah.
because they see not this right or wrong. They see a value. They can say, "Hey, I can put this in. I know I can make more."
Oh, that's it. Agriculture's always had that stigmatism though about it,
They don't know about that with a pumpkin. If you broke it down to them and said, hey, look, 5 grams of seed of pumpkin, look, you get $25, you're going to see them do math. But we don't surely value in these things. I 1 year, on the woodlands in the botanics, I grew all these pumpkins. It was like 5 grams of pumpkins. I had ample amounts of pumpkins. I was just giving them away. So I said, hey, man, what you did? Man, the value of this thing? He said, well, that's 20 grand right here. I said, okay, I'm going to stop giving them away. You know what I'm saying? If you taught the value in it, you will see the.
So 2 more.
I just want to say one big thing.
Okay.
I want to thank you, gentlemen, for coming and enlightening us, because a lot of us don't know exactly what you guys do from day to day and the pain and suffering you go through, right? But I think that one of the most important things is that you guys continue to educate people, because a lot of people's not going to read that you got right there. A lot of people like to hear, they like know face to face. So you having this meeting with her at this time, people's now seeing and hearing and putting together, say, "Hello, I never knew that." We only supply 15% of this island, and 80% is imported. Like, what the skin on? That will make some of the big damn boys that do earn these lots will start to say, "Look, let me just give Amaral a little piece and see what he can do with it." So I think the more education, like times you guys are sitting here now discussing, you guys should do it. Maybe come together, oil farmers come together once a month and start doing this. So people really know what you guys are really doing. And people can say, "Hey, I don't really knew that. Hey, I'm not some land I've never heard of those stars."
Yeah. And the good news is this will be posted to YouTube.
Exactly. Because the young people.
Yes.
All right, so I'm from the younger generation. I'm 21, but I do have a little bit of agricultural knowledge. 2 years, I've been studying a lot in soil science and all this type of stuff. I want to think of the future of what Bermuda is going to be. So I want to talk about artificial versus natural fertilizers. In the world we're experiencing, I'm having shakes for no reason. In the world we're experiencing a lot of inflation, mass growth. Craig Simmons, you were talking about how COVID managed to impact all of us. It wasn't just COVID. Remember, it was Russia. Russia has 25% of all fertilizers. And what happened to Sri Lanka, what happened to Egypt, what happened to all these other places? What I'm saying is we're very reliant on artificial fertilizers like ammonium nitrate, sodium potassium, I think that's what it's called, or super potassium. What are your jobs and what are the future of Bermuda if we're going to have to rely less on natural fertilizers? And also, what about ocean farming? What is the thoughts on that and what do you think that will be? And especially for hydroponics, I was talking about aquaponics, but I want to go back to back to the fertilizer. I remember speaking to a farmer. I wanted to do hydroponics as like a small experiment. He told me it wasn't feasible because of all the liquid fertilizer and the expenses it would be and the roundup costs. So I just want to see you guys' opinions on those two questions right there.
So, Joseph, you can go first.
So when it comes to the aquaponics, the fish get the fish provide nutrients for the plants. So it's a difference between aquaponics and hydroponics. So aquaponics is getting its nutrients from the fish.
So to be clear, how is it getting the nutrients from the fish? What of the fish is giving the nutrients?
Okay, so let me just
be more specific.
let me just give you a breakdown on how it works. So we feed the fish organic food. The waste from the fish is extracted through the clarifier. The clarifier removes the solids. The urine is like ammonia, and that mixes with two bacteria, Nitrosomonas and Nitrobacter, to form nitrites and then nitrates. And that provides the nitrogen for the plants.
Size to scale. How big would you need like a aquaponics tank to be like most of them?
Okay, the system that I have now, I figured this question will come up. The system I have now, okay. Well, I know we provide 200 pounds of fish annually and 3,000, let's say it's a monocrop lettuce, 3,160 heads of lettuce. And that's the capacity of the system that I have currently.
Nice.
That's a system is 20 feet by 8 feet. So that's a small plot providing that.
And it's scalable, it's from what.
Yeah, it is scalable. Yeah.
And just to be clear, that Mr. Weeks is not doing this commercially. He's a research and developer. So he's testing ideas here.
And anybody's welcome to come by to see the system at TACO. I'm there every day. So feel free to come by. I just buy the school field.
Right across from the field. You got a question?
Weeks brought it up, but I want to talk about it. So, what tissue culture? I'd like to know, like, what is the outlook on, say, things like tissue culture, hybridized, and everything to make stuff more amenable to our climate, and what are the limits to it, and also what are, I mean, this is all free, but what is the I understand there are benefits to some monocultures, but there's also a danger to monoculture, and what are we doing to avoid us
sliding into monoculture to the outcome?
Well, as far as local agriculture goes, all the outfits don't really specialize in monoculture. It's all mixed production. You may see the larger fields that require mechanization, like potatoes. They'll put out one field in potatoes just for the ease of working the crop. Most of the fields you'll see will be mixed production. As far as tissue culture and hybridization goes, it is a viable entity to entertain. Is it something that the farmers would take on to try and produce? I think a few guys have looked at the idea, but you need the infrastructure, you need dedicated staff for dealing just with that. And the one glaring thing that we always forget about this time of the year, come June to October, November, is hurricane season. So whatever facility you have set up, greenhouse wise and stuff, you at nature's whims there. Again, a lot could be developed with that. It's the feasibility. It's not something I would want to take on where I'm at in stage in my life and how we're looking at it. It is for that generation, the younger generation that's coming along, that's thinking outside the box, more tax savvy. The potential's there, but it's putting your finger on what are going to be the key crops to focus on with tissue culture. I think Tom was looking at sweet potato potentially here, but again, you're looking at material that's also patent protected. All that work's been done in the United States by various jurisdictions. So they come in, and start doing it here. There's a whole bunch of legal loopholes you'd have to jump, or not loopholes, hurdles you have to jump over to facilitate it. It can be done. But to look at, like somebody touted to me, why don't we grow seed potato in Bermuda? It's the cost of production to produce our own seed year over year, even if we're starting with tissue culture, then Gen 1, Gen 2, field production, the timelines for doing that in our environment here, it's not economically viable. And, again, we're all gamblers, but 9 times out of 10, you'll be wasting your time with that, with disease issues and just weather conditions. So.
Well, at this time, I'm going to ask for closing remarks from our panelists, but my colleague, Mr. Mello, I have to yield the floor to him. That'll be the last question before closing remarks. And the thing is, these guys have got to get past you to reach the door. So, you can kidnap them. I got to go, but you can kidnap them. Mr. Mello?
Gentlemen, you've been amazing tonight. I enjoyed listening to you. I'm a part-time farmer. About 11 years ago, I was leasing a piece of farmland, and then I lost it. I painfully watched the earnings excavate all the soil of it, fill it in with rubble and trash, and it still sits that rate today. Is there laws in place that you can secure your own farmland, and I can secure farmland, whether it's national trust or government or private?
Now, if I understand the question correctly, is there protocols or laws in place to protect arable land, you're saying?
Yeah.
Generally, there is. Again, the biggest problem ends up being the enforcement issue, because that falls with Department of Planning and, if I'm not mistaken, Conservation Services when it comes down to it. Now, if somebody goes in, starts taking out the topsoil, backfilling with rubble, they can be fined, they can be taken before the courts and stuff, but unfortunately, it never really gets done. So it sets a bad precedent for other individuals to turn around and do that. Again, most of the government lands that are in the government land bank that are leased out to farmers or gardeners, that's protected. They do their due diligence with that. The privately owned stuff, properties and stuff, that's a little harder to deal with. Some of them's out of sight, and the mantra is out of sight, out of mind. And the next thing you know, there could be horse stables going up, which literally can fall under agricultural, but you're taking prime land, taking it out of agricultural production, and it's an equine. So it's permissible as the way it's stated in the planning acts and stuff. So there's nothing to stop somebody from doing that. But again, that's what we have to contend with is, you can't tell a landowner that wants to put paddocks up for horses. And we could all think of different areas around the island where we pass on a regular basis and see that's prime production land, but they're well within their remit for doing it. And if they had the means to maintain it, then that's what happens. It's sad because guys like Chris, other young guys in the audience that are looking for property to grow on and stuff, and it's just not available, or it's going to be at the extremities of the island, or it's going to have problems with chickens in the area and everything else. So you're making a bad situation worse before you even get anything planted.
So we're going to end now with closing remarks. I'm going to let Chris go first, then Joseph, and we'll end up with Carlos.
Okay, thank you everybody, and thank you for Craig and the Bermuda College for having us. Closing remarks. Let's see now. What would I talk about in this time? So very good that we're all here in person together, and believe it or not, we are a building community. Spending the hour and a half together and talking about real problems that we all share together, and hopefully after we've metabolized this a bit, I think there would be some real solutions that have come out of this. So good for us to take this home, talk about this as much as possible, because like the gentleman here was saying, or gentleman there was saying, that they didn't know these things, that Bermuda produces 20% of its own food, 80% imported. The amount of farmland that's not being farmed right now, which is the equivalent to 209 football fields worth of land. Nobody knows what an acre is, so I've converted it to football fields. We all know what a football field looks like. And for those of you that are growing at home, imagine how much you grow in your few hundred square feet, and then multiply by one football field, and then by 200. We'd be having a very different conversation here at the Bermuda College Library, if more of the land was available. So that is a longer problem that would take another panel discussion to talk about. But I definitely want everybody to leave with this little ignite of hope, because while things sound very dire, I would say that there really is a resurgence in agriculture, maybe not in larger farms like we're used to thinking about when we imagine agriculture. We think about the tractor or how things work. There's quite a lot of smaller businesses starting up and people doing things, in the scale that's manageable. So we can either have more of those and, sharing those skill sets with other people so that more of that can happen. So thank you.
I heard a gentleman speak about monetizing the industry. How much money can you make, right? There's a lot of infrastructure that you can get into. So if there's no tissue culture company, form yours. We have a situation in Bermuda when it rains, there's a lot of flooding, and water is a component that, is needed. Why not capture that water, filter it, and then provide that? So there are ways, if you really intentional, there are ways to monetize this. You just have to be intentional and speak to the farmers, see what they need. If they have to bring something in, you be the source, you be the provider, right? So there are ways, you just have to be intentional. That's all.
All right. I'd just like to thank everyone that turned out tonight, and pleasantly surprised no one's fell asleep, which is good. So we've captivated everyone's attention. My takeaway from this that I hope people will keep in mind. Again, it's a job. It's not a job. It's a lifestyle. What we do, you will be constantly learning every step of the way. There's a wealth of knowledge between commercial guys such as myself, what Chris is doing, what Mr. Weeks is doing, and collectively, when we take all those little bits of crumbs and pull it together, you got a loaf of bread. So what all of you are doing, as insignificant as it seems, it all matters. So, keep the effort going. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. Most of the farmers, if not all of them, are readily available when you do catch them and they're not, full bore harvesting and stuff, to disseminate information, pick their brains, ask the questions, because you will constantly learn in this industry for the rest of your life. So, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Robert Masters. I'm the president of the Friends of the College Library, and we have put on this panel discussion this evening for yourselves. I just wanted to let you know about the Friends of the College Library. It was formed to augment the facility here, this beautiful building. And we make various purchases for the library, but also the main goal is to make the community more aware about this facility that we have here. So by providing information and holding events, that is our goal. And if you wanted to support us, we rely on our membership, and there are membership forms upstairs. We are a registered charity, so it is $25 per annum, and you get to use the library services, come here and do and use all of our facilities. So I just wanted to thank our panel this evening. It's been a really informative, and you've covered a great deal about farming, and we really appreciate it. I have a small token of appreciation for our panel, and I just wanted to present these to you. So, Joseph and Carlos.
Thank you.
And Chris. So thank you very much, and thank you all for coming.